What's up everyone, welcome to the video. We are here breaking down the Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond Raceway for Sunday, August 14th around 3 p.m. Eastern for our second trip at the action track. I'm not sure if anybody calls it that anymore, but it is still technically its nickname. And I'm really not expecting much action this weekend, as we've seen at the shorter flat tracks this year, which are my personal favorite track type for DFS purposes, tend to not be the most exciting races, which is fine with me because I am tired of these exciting races, because a lot of the excitement, the wrecks, and the carnage happens to be my drivers. Like once again last weekend, Christopher Bell happens to end my week as he takes out Ross Chastain. I'm not sure really whose fault it was, but either way, it certainly was not beneficial to me because I had a lot of Ross, I had a lot of Bell, and obviously that killed both of their days as Ross got stuck a lap down. And then I also had a ton of Daniel Suarez, who was running first prior to that, then gets a flat tire and it derailed quite quickly. So I'm hoping for a nice boring race here where it's follow the leader and hopefully I have the leader. But anyway, if you are brand new here, my name is Chris Pennell. I break down the NASCAR DFS slate each and every single week on this channel. You can also find me live on Sunday mornings or afternoons, planning around 11:30 this week. And we've had a lot of people in the streams recently, so come and say hi. Always a good time. Love to see you all. And you can also find me over on Osmo, or better known as Stochastic these days, doing their live before lock show with Jason Floyd and writing the tournament article over on the website if you ever want to check those out. And if you do end up enjoying today's free content, the only thing I ask in return, it's something small, just a very, very small favor from you. If you could leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are brand new, and hit that bell so you get notified whenever I post new content or go live on Sunday mornings. And feel free to leave a comment down below, agreeing or disagreeing with anything I say throughout the duration of today's video, or if you want to tell me hi or I suck, you are free to do that as well. And if we could once again get 300 plus likes on this week's video, that'd be absolutely awesome. We've gotten over 400 the past few weeks now, so you guys have been absolutely killing it. I truly do appreciate it. I know it's something small, but every little bit does help, and it goes a long way in the YouTube algorithm. It doesn't just help me out, it helps us all out, because the more eyeballs that are on these videos helps us all out as a community, so I truly do appreciate it. And don't forget to check out the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks, to make these videos possible. And as of right now, you can use promo code CPEN if you're a new user over there to get an instant deposit match bonus up to $100. There is no strings attached. It is free money. Use that to your advantage. Again, that is code CPEN over on prizepicks.com. But I think that is it for the plug. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this week's race. And as previously mentioned, this is your Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond Raceway. There's your outline of the track. It is a short flat track. I would say most comparable to Phoenix and New Hampshire, but you could also throw in Martinsville. You can throw in Gateway, a newer track that we ran at earlier this season. And I don't think it would hurt to throw in Nashville as well, since it's a bit flatter. But I would say Phoenix and Richmond, or Phoenix and New Hampshire, are your best comps, but really the most part always is going to be what happens over the course of the weekend. But drivers that were fast at those tracks, I would at least think there's going to be some correlation. And obviously what happened earlier in the season at the first Richmond race, although that was a long time ago, it is 3/4 of a mile in length, and we have 400 laps this weekend. So we were back to a track where, yeah, you're going to want to jam in a lot of dominators. We have just under 300 total dominator points available to us, so at least 2 per lineup, but a lot, I'm sure I'm going to get to at least 3. Now, I am recording this portion of the video before practice and qualifying, so if we happen to get some cheap doms up front, maybe you can stretch that to 4, but for the most part, we are looking at 2 to 3 doms per lineup, and outside of that, there's really nothing too special to roster construction here at Richmond. You just mainly have to nail the dominators, and then hopefully your mid and low tier drivers kind of fall into place. And as per usual, I do want to shout out the winners from last week's contest. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I host a weekly YouTube contest for NASCAR on DraftKings. So if you want to come in and join, comment that dedication down below, or hit up my Twitter or the pinned comment down below in this video. Either way, we will get you in there if you do so want to. And they have been filling quite quickly, so we have been running 2 contests if you don't get the chance to join the first one. And if you want to join both, you are more than welcome to do that. But anyway, getting into the shout outs here, we'll start with the first contest, and taking home the gold and over $120, we had Mojo 2K killing the field by about 20 some points here. Then in second, taking the silver, we had Del Kane still over $100. Then rounding out the podium, taking on the bronze, Vermont Steins in third. And then on the bubble, but still getting some change, Bleeker in silver, also known as Trey, longtime member of the Discord. And rounding out the top 5, 11B Cheney in fifth. Then in the second contest, at first we had Ryan EOZ. In the second, Daddy Duncan 87. Third, my man Mass, longtime member of the Discord over there. We all love Mass. And fourth and fifth, we had Arem 815, then Brutus 3. So shout out to all the winners. Do appreciate y'all joining. I'd be more than happy to have you once again this week. All right, so practice and qualifying just ended. So these are going to be my first reactions, first thoughts to the slate. We're going to run down through it together. These are currently not the most up-to-date odds. Again, this is like just as soon as practice ended. So at some point, if I pause this and we get the updated numbers, I'm more than happy to put them on there for you. But if you're wondering my overall thoughts on the pricing this weekend, I think DK did a pretty good job. We have 6 drivers in the 5-figure range, which might seem like a bit much. But if it's a 400 lap race and close to 300 total downer point available to us kind of race, you have to have some of these drivers priced up like this. So I think they did fine because, yeah, if you're going to leave a lot of laps, you're definitely still going to outpace that price point by quite a bit. And I always have to mention, if you do want access to the sheet that I preview for you guys for free over on YouTube, link can be found down below if you do want to join the best NASCAR DFS community out there. And I do cover other sports as well. We do have football coming up soon, but tons of stuff on the spreadsheet, pit times, green flag speed cheat sheet, and there's just a lot more to it besides this. Projections for all sites, the optimizer, ownership projections, the Discord community, which is active 24/7 no matter what day of the week. So a lot more stuff over there, including the article and whatnot. So if you want to check it out, link can be found down below. Just another way that does help support the channel. But anyway, let's get right into it. So we'll start up top here with the most expensive driver on the slate, Kyle Busch, $11,400, 13K over on FanDuel. He is starting in the back of the pack here in 29th. I'm assuming those odds are going to go up. I think we see him in the 4-digit range once DK Sportsbook updates these odds here. But if you are playing cash games, he definitely looks viable. Now, like I said, I have not yet ran projections. I have not yet ran ownership. This is kind of my first reactions to what we saw. And I have a lot of thoughts after what I saw on the track on Saturday, because the track changed many times throughout practice. And you're going to notice the drivers that were in the second group, their times were much slower. And just to show you guys an example here, we can go to the practice results page on the spreadsheet. And the drivers highlighted in yellow were the ones that were in the second group. And as you can see, overall, they were just much slower. But at the same time, you saw some of these guys faster in qualifying that were fast with these guys in the first group. And you saw some of these guys in the first group slow during qualifying. It just depends on what time you were on the track. So again, I'm not going to make practice be the end-all be-all this weekend. It's just mainly me pointing out that, yes, Kyle Larson didn't have the greatest practice numbers, but he was also in the second session, which was much slower than the first group, and he was actually second overall once I aggregated the numbers of the second group, so he was still pretty fast. So that is something to keep in mind in qualifying, to kind of nullify those times a little bit to a degree. But again, just letting you guys know that practice times could be a bit skewed this weekend, and make sure you know which drivers were in the first or second group. But anyway, getting back to Kyle Busch here, he's starting in the back of the pack, and it's hard not to have any interest. I mean, he's starting nearly in 30th place. He was a very strong car in practice, and we have a ton of practice data to work with this weekend. We had some guys almost run 50 laps. I think I saw Harrison Burton, or he's either Burton or Logano. They ran like 47 laps in practice. So we have a ton of data to sift through. Maybe a little bit skewed, but it's still nice to have a lot of these numbers. And it's Kyle Busch. I mean, you typically always expect him to be a top 5, top 10 contender no matter what kind of track we are at this year. Richmond is a pretty strong track for him, although he hasn't really been a top 5 guy recently, more of a top 10 guy who's been in the top 10 each and every single time. The only other driver that has done that recently is his teammate Martin Truex Jr., third most dominant points here the past few seasons. Although I have been playing Kyle Busch more so at the larger tracks this season, where he just seems to have a ton of raw speed. But 12th at New Hampshire, 2nd at Gateway, pretty much top 10 across the board besides Nashville, and was on the fringe top 10 there at New Hampshire. So he's going to be in play for me. The only drawback is the price point. It might be a little bit tough to fit him in if you're trying to jam in the post hitter Kyle Larson, but if you can make it work, I feel like he has a strong cash game play. But as far as tournaments are concerned, if Kyle Busch is going to be massively owned, I think I would rather get the guys like Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Larson, Chastain, because they can pick up those dominant points. And I'm having a hard time seeing Kyle Busch get up front during this race. If he runs top 10, sure, that's fine. That's a solid race. But at his price point, if a guy like Denny Hamlin can get up front and lead 100 laps, he is going to massively outscore Kyle Busch. That is something to keep in mind. And speaking of Denny Hamlin, his teammate, $11,100 on DraftKings, starting inside the top 3 here. Excellent at Richmond, home track form, and pretty much he is second in every single statistical category, only behind his teammate Truex. So obviously Hamlin is very good here at Richmond. And if you're looking at some of his numbers this year at the shorter flat tracks, 6 at New Hampshire and Nashville, had an issue at Gateway, was awful at Martinsville, won at Richmond earlier in the season, although did not have the best car, but did put himself in a position to win at the end of the race. So yeah, I don't have a problem with Denny Hamlin. He's just been fast overall this year. If you're looking at the practice times, basically looks like a top 5, top 3 car. Got to keep in mind though, he was in the first group and they were much faster, but obviously qualified well, so I think the speed is real. And he's definitely someone I'm going to want to roster in tournaments. Definitely going to be one of the top dominant plays on the board. Chase Elliott, $10,800. He's starting back in 23rd. If you can't quite afford Kyle Busch, I don't think Chase Elliott's a bad consolation prize there. He was just a little bit faster in some areas in practice than Kyle Busch. Both these guys were in the first group here, but third in the 10 laps, second in the 15, second in the 20. His car looks strong, and at the short flat tracks this year, Chase Elliott has been pretty strong. Second at New Hampshire, first at Nashville, wasn't great at Gateway, 10th at Martinsville though, got a lot of laps there. 14th at Richmond and 11th at Phoenix, although I do believe he was second in green flag speed at Richmond, if I remember correctly. So I think Elliott's a fine play. Basically, if you can't afford Busch, get to Elliott. And I feel like I might end up with more Elliott than Kyle Busch anyway in tournaments just because of the price discount there. Dropping down to Martin Truex Jr., $10,600, probably everyone's favorite play this weekend. I know I'm going to have a ton. And he backed it up in practice, had a good qualifying session as well. Every single time at Richmond, you have to have interest in Truex. He is first in every single statistical category here. The most DraftKings points per race, an insane average finish of 2.3, by far the best drive rating. And then average running position inside the top 5. He's won half the races here the past few seasons, and he's been in the top 5 each and every single time. And if you're looking at what he's done recently, 4th at Richmond, 6th at Gateway, 4th at New Hampshire. Has had some bad races mixed in there, but I think Truex is going to be strong. He's got a great pit crew, and he's got some good track position to work with. And the fact that he's not the most expensive driver on the slate this weekend was kind of baffling to me. If you're playing over on FanDuel, he is, so you're not getting a discount there. But over on DK, even if you do play Kyle Larson, it is really easy to fit in Martin Truex Jr. alongside with him. So loving him a lot. Definitely going to be one of my highest owned drivers on the slate. And like I said, was strong in practice as well, but was also in the first group. Kyle Larson, $10,300. Pretty cheap over on FanDuel relatively, $11K over there. Starting on the pole, his odds were plus 1,000 to open this weekend. I would assume he's going to get put down to probably the favorite, if not close to it. They still might have Truex as the favorite there, but Larson's odds are definitely going to go down. Obviously, practice wasn't insane for him, but you got to keep in mind he was in that second group, and if you do aggregate the numbers out, he was the second fastest of that group. So don't have any concerns about the speed there. Obviously, he was very fast in qualifying when it kind of got even there. The one thing I was really hoping Larson wasn't going to get in the pole this weekend, because I just wanted to play a ton of Truex. I wanted to play a ton of Hamlin. I didn't want to have to worry about anything else, because I haven't really been playing too much Larson this year. But starting on the pole at a short track, it's pretty tough to pass the leader. And if he can just lead a good amount of laps early on, Larson's got a pretty easy path to optimal, plus his pit crew and he himself have been excellent on pit road this year. So it's going to be kind of hard to avoid him. 14th at New Hampshire wasn't great, but 4th at Nashville, 12th at Gateway, 5th at Richmond earlier in the season. Not typically a lap leader here, but you got to have interest in Larson in the pole. If you're playing cash games, I would probably recommend plugging him in. Again, haven't ran all my numbers yet, but starting in the pole at 10-3 for a guy like Kyle Larson, it's going to be kind of hard not to get to, especially in cash. You compare him with a guy like Elliot or Kyle Busch to try to offset on the pole where there's risk if he loses spots to get the extra PD in there. So I do like Larson. I'm not sure how overweight I'm going to be. I might just take an even to the field approach there and go heavier in guys like Hamlin and Truex, who I was really liking heading into the weekend. And even Ross Chastain, who we're about to talk about, $10,100 over on DraftKings, starting on the front row alongside Larson. I imagine his odds are going to get better once they update as well, but he killed it in practice, first in the 1, 5, and 10 lap. I removed his 15, 20, and 25 lap runs because he was last in every single group there, which I felt weren't completely accurate, and it did skew the numbers a bit. So I took those out, but do keep in mind he was last of those drivers. But I don't think that's probably the best way to look at it. But super fast there. I wouldn't say the short flat tracks have been the most amazing for him as far as his dominator points are concerned, because as you can see, 0 laps led per race, still getting some fast laps mixed in there. He's getting good finishes, but he's just not really dominating. I mean, 8th at New Hampshire, 5th at Nashville, 8th at Gateway, 5th at Martinsville, and 2nd at Phoenix. Like, the finishes are great, but at $10,100 starting in 2nd, it's not Chastain starting in 22nd like he does almost every single weekend. We're starting 20 spots further up, so he's got to be able to get up front. I'm not sure he's going to outpace Larson early on. Then you also have Truex and Hamlin right behind him. So while I think he can be a top 5 guy for the majority of the race, at his price point, we need to get up front. I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen. I was hoping he was going to qualify in the pole because, I mean, I trust Chastain. He's got a great pit crew this year. I'm going to play him in tournaments, but as far as cash games are concerned, I would feel a bit safer there with Kyle Larson. You also have to keep in mind Denny Hamlin's in the row right behind him, so hopefully that doesn't spell trouble for those two early on. And then moving on to the 9K range, we have Ryan Blaney just under 10K here at $9,900, starting in 10th. Kind of kissed the wall in his qualifying run, so that's why he didn't qualify that well. It was actually first in the, I believe it was the first group for when they did the qualifying for Group 1. But if you're looking at his practice numbers, you're going to notice they don't look that impressive in the short run. 21st, 16th, and 9th, but later in the run, it got really good, 7th, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd. And yes, I know he was in the first group where the times were faster, but something to keep in mind was, and if you're watching, they did mention this on the broadcast several times, Blaney didn't come out to practice until later in the run, which is when the track started slowing down. He still put up some very strong numbers, similar to guys like Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Chase Elliott, as far as the long runs are concerned. So I think Blaney's going to have a pretty good card this weekend. I mean, no shorter flat tracks are what Blaney's bread and butter kind of tracks. If you're looking at his finishes this year, wasn't great at New Hampshire, but 3rd at Nashville, 4th at Gateway, 4th at Martinsville, 7th at Richmond, 4th at Phoenix. I mean, the finishes have been there for him. He's been fast average green flag speed-wise, and he's actually averaging the most DraftKings points per race at these track types so far this season, with the most top 5s and the good chunk of dominator points. So I actually don't think he's a bad play whatsoever. I'm hoping people are going to overreact to some of these practice times, and I feel like he was running better at New Hampshire than what the finish was. I'd have to go back and look at that. But overall, I still think Blaney's a pretty solid play here. We'll get to him in tournaments. Don't think he's going to be a cash game play for me. But over on FanDuel, very easy to fit in at $10,000. Then we have Christopher Bell at $9,600. Pretty expensive over on FanDuel. He's starting in 21st. These odds are definitely going to go up. He was plus 900 open the weekend, tied with Chase Elliott, and only behind guys like Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex. I assume those numbers are going to get worse for him. Didn't have a strong practice session, and he was in the first group, keep in mind. It wasn't that great. The thing is, though, Christopher Bell is really good at these track types. He's also really good at Richmond. Short career so far, but does have 4 races here. Been in the top 15 each and every single time, and has also been a dominator before. And he's also finished top 10 the past 3 shorter flat tracks, and has had 4 top 10s at them so far this year. And he's also the most recent winner at New Hampshire, which is a pretty similar track to Richmond. So it's kind of a tough proposition here because I'm not sure how much I'm going to look into the practice times this weekend. I mean, obviously, if you were fast, that's good. I can't hold it against you if you were going to be fast, but Bell being in the first session, it just not really putting up the best numbers is concerning. Obviously, didn't qualify that well either. I'm still probably going to have some slight interest in tournaments, but as far as being a core play or a cash play for me, that's just probably not going to be the case. Then we have Joey Logano, $9,300. He's starting in 17th, and as you saw when we looked at the practice results page, just aggregated, he was the fastest of the second group, so I don't think he's going to be terrible. Did slip up in his qualifying session in practice, or I thought he would have qualified, or in his qualifying, not practice. So I think he would have qualified better than what he did, so do keep that in mind. He did show some speed relatively, considering he was in that slower group. And shorter flat tracks, I mean, Joey Logano, excellent at them, also very good at Richmond, some of the overall best numbers here. Doesn't have quite the dominant points as some of these JGR drivers, but has still been very good. He also won at Gateway early in the season, 2nd at Martinsville, 8th at Phoenix. Wasn't great at Richmond earlier in the year, where he finished 17th, but Logano's an intriguing tournament play that I think might go a bit overlooked. And then we have Kevin Harvick, $9,100. He's starting in 13th. Was first in average green flag speed here earlier in the season. Pretty good at Richmond for the most part. Finished 5th at New Hampshire. Just won last week. Got that monkey off his back. And if you're looking at the shorter flat track numbers this year, Kevin Harvick has been one of the faster drivers. Not really been a dominator by any means. 0 laps led per race, but he's been able to get some fast laps. I think starting in 13th, being priced right around guys like Tyler Reddick that has PD, and then Logano and Bell also have PD, this should lead to him being under-owned and under the radar, so I don't think he's a bad tournament play, but can't get there in cash games at that price point at $9,100, especially because Tyler Reddick's here at $8,800. Starting in 26, he showed some speed in practice. Keep in mind, he was in the first group, but still P2 in the 1 lap, P2 in the 5 lap, just sucked during qualifying. But at this price point, Reddick's really cheap this week. I want to say he was $10,000 if I remember correctly last week. He got quite the price dump here. Was running well, but then I want to say something with his engine was going wrong and he had to bring it down. But short flat tracks haven't really been his bread and butter this year. Did finish 3rd at Phoenix and 12th at Richmond, but you do not need much starting back in 26. So I think he's a fine cash game play, but in tournaments, I would probably look to go elsewhere just to try to get off some of the ownership. Not saying you can't play Reddick in tournaments, but don't forget about guys like Kevin Harvick and the next two guys we're going to talk about in tournaments that should be lower owned because they don't offer quite the PD upside. And we'll start with William Byron, $8,600. He is starting in 4th. He did dominate at Richmond early in the season. Was not fast whatsoever in practice, but again, you got to keep in mind he was part of that second group that was much slower, so I'm not going to hold these times completely against him because he happened to qualify quite well, P4. And this is the cheapest William Byron's been for as long as I can remember. So he does not need to do too much to pay off his price point. I know we always think of William Byron being that guy that's, in the 9K, close to 10K range where he's going to have to do a lot to pay off his price point. At $8,600, this is kind of like playing Kurt Busch starting inside the top 5, hoping you get fast laps here and there and contending for a top 3, top 5 finish. I mean, is it possible he gets up front? Sure, it is, but I don't really expect that to happen, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. To finish 3rd at Richmond early in the season, and obviously dominated and won Martinsville. Hasn't had the best stretch of luck finish-wise. I think he has like one top 10 the past couple of months now, so it's been some tough times for William Byron. But overall, short flat tracks, his numbers are kind of boosted up because of Richmond and Phoenix. But starting in 4th at that price point, I do think it's worth at least looking at in tournaments. Alex Bowman, $8,400. He's starting in 5th. He is dirt cheap over on FanDuel at $7,800. I'll definitely have more exposure to Bowman over on the FanDuel side of things. Over on DK, I'd probably rather play Byron there, but looking at his numbers in practice, 15 in the 1 lap, then 34 in the 5 lap, and 26 in the 10 lap. Again, second group, so don't want to go too overboard there. And he is pretty good at Richmond, just have 3 top 10 finishes here the past few seasons, also a win under his belt. Finish-wise, kind of some bad luck like William Byron, 35th at New Hampshire, 36th at Nashville. But then earlier in the season, 13th, 12th, 8th, and 14th. Starting in 5th, it's a bit high. It's kind of where I'd say his ceiling is. I do expect him to move back, but if you're looking for a tournament play, I think he'll be lower owned than William Byron. So he's the pivot there, but I do prefer Byron between the two. But I think Bowman's an excellent play over on FanDuel and tournaments at that price point. Daniel Suarez, $8,200. He is starting in 24th. Hard not to like him. I mean, Bowman is $200 cheaper over on FanDuel, but he is starting about 19 spots further up. So I would assume Suarez is going to be higher owned, so Bowman would be the pivot play there. But Suarez, definitely a guy you have to consider. I mean, the Trackhouse cars are fast just about everywhere this season. He finished 9th at New Hampshire, 15th at Nashville, wasn't great at Gateway or Martinsville, but 16th at Richmond, 9th at Phoenix. If you're just looking for a cheaper PD play for a guy like Suarez and his car with that upside, I think he's definitely worth looking at. Practice wasn't going to blow you away, though. P9 in the 1 lap, P8 in the 5 lap, but Suarez is definitely going to be a top 15 contender, so I think he's fine in a cash game format in tournaments. I mean, I'm probably going to start pivoting to guys like Byron and Bowman there, but I'll still have some exposure here and there on Daniel Suarez. Bubba Wallace, $8,000. He has been on fire the past month or so now. Starting at 11th, it's a bit high for me. I wouldn't say Richmond's my favorite track to win a roster. Bubba Wallace doesn't obviously have a great track record here, but did finish 3rd at New Hampshire recently, 12th at Nashville, then some poor finishes here and there, but he has been getting hot recently. I'm probably not going to be going overboard on Bubba Wallace. Just didn't show me a ton to get too excited about. Obviously had a good qualifying run there, but I'm not going to be over the moon on Wallace. He's definitely a tournament play only for me, but I'll still probably end up with more Daniel Suarez. Dropping down to the 7K range, we have Eric Jones, $7,900. Cheap on FanDuel. I think he's a good FanDuel play. DraftKings, it's a little bit tougher over there, starting in 9th. Was P7, the 1 lap in practice. The 5 lap, it got worse, but he came in early. We never get a ton of practice data from Eric Jones, and he came back out later when the track was slowing down, so I'm not going to completely hold it against him there, but the 5 lap wasn't great for Eric Jones. But looking at some of the overall numbers this year at the shorter flat tracks, 19th at New Hampshire, 11th at Nashville, 7th at Gateway, which those are larger. I mean, I hate to really put those into too much of a comparison than New Hampshire and Richmond, but they're flatter in general and shorter than a 1.5 mile track. So they made the cut for comparable tracks, but I'm not going to put too much into that. I would say at the more shorter flat tracks, he hasn't exactly been that great. So not a ton of interest in Jones. There are some drivers I'd probably rather get to. Chase Briscoe, $7,700. Not a ton of interest here. I know he won at Phoenix early in the season, which is a similar track. 11th at Richmond, 9th at Martinsville, 15th at New Hampshire. I don't think he's the worst play out there. He's definitely a tournament target, but I'm not going to go on my way to play Chase Briscoe. Obviously didn't show a ton of speed in practice, but I hate to put too much into some of these practice numbers this weekend. Ty Gibbs, $7,600. He's starting in 14th. He did quite well for us last week. Probably would have been a top 5 contender without that speeding penalty at the end of the day. He was in that second group, so yeah, these numbers aren't going to look as pretty as they could. But I think he's worth at least a look in tournaments, but I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be pretty heavy on Austin Syndrick here probably, so it's not going to lead me to too much Ty Gibbs exposure, but I am excited to see what he can do. He is a winner here in at Richmond in the Xfinity Series, so that could go well for him, but he's definitely a tournament target only for me. But was 11th in the 15 and the 20 lap, which is not bad, so I think he's certainly worth a look in tournaments, but the guy right below him is going to carry a ton of ownership here, and it's Austin Syndrick, $7,500 on DraftKings, only $6,500 over on FanDuel. He's starting all the way back in 33rd. And yes, I know he was in the first group in practice, but he was still pretty fast. P3 in the one lap, then P5, P6, P5, P7 across the board here. Good in the long run as well. And if you're looking at some of his finishes at similar tracks this year, Austin Syndrick's actually been doing quite well. 13th, 7th, 11th, and 11th. And then it was a 20th at Richmond early in the season, but I like that 13th place finish that he had at New Hampshire. But you don't need to do too much here at this price point and for where he's starting. As long as he doesn't wreck, I mean, Syndrick should be a top 15, top 20 contender. That's really all you need in cash games, starting all the way back in 33rd. I understand the pivot away in tournaments, but in cash games, I think you just kind of have to plug him in there. Austin Dillon, $7,200. He's starting in 12th. Obviously, practice sucked, but is not bad at Richmond at all. It's one of his better tracks. Does have 4 top 10s here the past few races, only 1 top 5. I think it was Richmond where it was a night race late in the summer and he got up front, started dominating. It was crazy. He had a ton of speed out of nowhere. Not expecting that today, but I mean, I wouldn't say Dillon's been bad at the shorter flat tracks this year. Did finish 3rd at Martinsville, 10th at Richmond, and typically a top 15 contender. There's a couple finishes outside the top 20 there, but for the most part, it does make him playable, but starting in 12th, I'm probably not going to get to a lot of Austin. I would much rather play the other Austin with Syndrick here, starting so many spots further back, and I feel like at the end of the day, they have somewhat similar finishing position upside as well. And Brad Keselowski, $7,000. I kind of hyped him up in the stochastic video earlier in the week, and it must have had an issue here transporting the Keselowski name here. It might have been a spelling error on my part, so I'll have to get back into that one. And there we go, it is fixed. Not much of a difference here, but P23 in the 5 lap for those of you that were wondering. He is pretty good at Richmond. Obviously, he's always been good at the shorter flat tracks, but so far this year, while it hasn't been too pretty, he was really fast at Richmond earlier in the season. I believe he was top 5 in average green flag speed, and he also finished top 10 in New Hampshire earlier in the season. I was kind of hoping he would qualify in the low teens to like 10th. I was hoping he'd be around like 10th to 14th to get low ownership in tournaments. Starting in 8th, it's kind of right around where you'd expect his ceiling to be, so it's not making me like Brad Keselowski as much as I thought I would. I would still play him in tournaments a little bit, but again, it's just going to be really hard to get away from some of this Austin Syndrick chalk in the 7K range. But if you are feeling bold and you're going for a low-one play, Keselowski is definitely a name to keep on your radar. Dropping down to the 6K range, we have Eric Amarola, $6,800. He is starting 1 spot ahead of Austin Syndrick, and both these guys were extremely fast in practice, and it's going to be really hard not to like Eric Amarola here because I always like him at the shorter flat tracks. Stewart-Haas in general tends to perform not bad at all at these track types, and for Amarola, this has been his best track type ever since joining Stewart-Haas Racing, and he absolutely killed it in practice. I forget exactly how many laps he ran, but I thought he was going to race the whole race at one point. But P4, 2, first in the long run. He has a really good car. Obviously did not qualify well. Kind of hit the track at the wrong time during qualifying, but he's cheap on both sides. If you are playing cash games, he's going to be a staple there. I mean, just starting at 32nd for a really fast car. He's got a couple of top 10s here at Richmond. He has a 5th place finish at Gateway, 8th place finish at Martinsville, 12th at Phoenix. Doesn't need to do much to pay off this price point. The car looks really good this weekend. Yes, I know, first group, so the times are a bit skewed there, but overall, I still think he would have had a fast car in general. So I do like Amarola. In cash games, again, in tournaments, these guys are going to carry some high ownership, so you have to find ways to get different, and you can do that with rostering guys like Brad Keselowski instead. But if you're playing cash games, hard not to play A there. Chris Buescher, $6,600. He's starting in 18. Some pretty slow times here. Was in the second group with his teammate Brad Keselowski. He did qualify a bit better than where he practiced, so I don't think he's going to be terrible, but I don't think Chris Buescher is going to be like a force this weekend. Look at some of the shorter flat track numbers. It's fine. I mean, top 15, top 20. I would expect him to be anywhere from like 15th to 20th place during this race. Starting in 18th, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a ceiling, but his cap is upside. But again, if you're looking to get away from some of that high ownership on Eric Amarola, a guy like Chris Buescher is how you can do that. But I'm not going to be over the moon excited about rostering Chris Buescher here. But 15th at Richmond early in the season, 7th at New Hampshire, 17th at New Hampshire, I should say. It's not bad, but I'm just not expecting a ton of spots gained for Chris Buescher here. Rookie Stenhouse Jr. starting in 20th at this price point. I wouldn't call it appealing. He's been awful with the short flat tracks this year. Earlier in the season, 32nd at Gateway, 27th at Martinsville, 20th at Richmond, 20th at Phoenix. It's been a bit better the past couple of weeks where he finished 22nd at New Hampshire and 16th at Nashville, but starting in 20th, that's about where I'd expect his ceiling to be, so don't really have any interest in Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Michael McDowell, $6,200, starting in 34th. Again, if you're just looking for a cash game play, don't hate the idea of using Michael McDowell here. Did show some speed in practice. I don't want to reference practice too much, but if you were fast, I mean, it's at least nice to look at. Did finish 13th in Nashville, but overall has not been his best track type overall this year. But starting in 34th, again, if you're just looking for a cheap play to fit in a couple of dominators, Michael McDowell is going to move up. As long as he doesn't wreck, he's going to move up and gain spots, potentially 10, if not more. So definitely don't hate the idea of using McDowell. Justin Haley, $6,000. He's starting in 27th. Did had a good race at Gateway and Phoenix. Top 15, top 20 finishes there, but outside of that, it hasn't been super impressive for him at these track types. Was fast in practice, wasn't that first group though, so could be a bit skewed. I'd rather play McDowell. I mean, starting a few spots further up, but Haley's in play as well. Harrison Burton, $5,100. He ran about 50 laps in practice. He's starting all the way back in 30th. Some overall pretty fast practice times. Wasn't that first group though, so I don't want to put too much into it. But if you're just looking for a cheap play who qualified poorly and showed some speed in practice, I don't think Burton is the worst idea there. Cole Custer, $5,700. He's starting in 7th. Pretty scary to roster Cole Custer in this scenario, but like I said, the Stewart-Haas cars tend to break some speed at these track types. I mean, Chase Briscoe didn't qualify that poorly. Kevin Harvick didn't do bad. Eric Amarola qualified awful, but he was super fast in practice. And obviously Cole Custer did well. It didn't really blow it away in practice or anything, but I don't hate Custer as just a low-owned dart play. But the finishes have not been there for him at these track types this year. So I would be very careful rostering Cole Custer. I'm probably not even going to get 10% exposure to him, but I'm going to try to at least get a sprinkle. Noah Gregson starting in 19th, $5,500. Had a lot of speed early on last week and then did the crab walk. I forget what point of the race was, but it got ugly for Noah Gregson. Didn't show any speed whatsoever in practice. Starting in the top 20, it's hard to have too much interest there, so I'll probably be pretty low on Gregson. Ty Dillon, $5,400, starting in 22nd. This is about where you'd expect the ceiling to be, so probably not going to get to too much Ty Dillon. Corey LaJoie did show some speed there, but again, I'm not going to put too much into some of the practice numbers there. Has one good finish at a short flat track this year, and that was Nashville, which is probably the biggest one of them all. And I don't really have too much interest in LaJoie. Again, I've not tried to build lineups yet, so I'm hoping you don't have to drop down to LaJoie too often, but not someone I'm really expecting to get more than 5% exposure to. Gillen starting way too high for me to have really any interest at all. And then I'm not going to play Castle, no Ware, no McLeod, no JJ Yaley. So besides LaJoie, I don't really want to go much lower than that. I don't even really want to play LaJoie. Though I like Burton in the 5K range, but after that, it gets really ugly unless you want to take a dart throw on Cole Custer. But with that being said, I think that's going to be it for the video. So if you made it all the way through, please let me know down in the comments below. I do appreciate everyone that can make it all the way through. Check out the Patreon if you want. Lots of extra content over there. I'll be working on that over the course of later this evening and tonight. A little bit of a later start here with the late qualifying time, but we'll still get everything out. Hope to see you on the live stream tomorrow around 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And I wish you all the best of luck this weekend. And I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully.